Hello, welcome to the audio video for the article Jane Addams, Reformer. Please remember that as we read this article together, that you're to be completing box 5 on the Progressive Movement Solutions notes. It's on the back. Jane Addams, she founded a settlement house called the Hull House, Hull, to help solve immigration problems, and your instructions are, while reading the article Jane Addams, Reformer, please draw small pictures representing the ways immigrants could get help and have fun at the Hull House. You're looking for 6 ways that immigrants could get help and have fun at the Hull House. You'll do those little pictures and label them over here in your notes. Okay, here we go. There's a dandy word to describe America's cities in the 19th century. The word is polyglot, and it comes from 2 Greek words, poly, meaning more than one, and glossa, meaning tongue. A polyglot city is one where many tongues or languages are heard. America's cities were polyglot because they were filled with immigrants, people from around the world. If all those diverse peoples with their different languages and customs could live together in a crowded city, perhaps they would find a way to teach the diverse peoples of the world to get along. But they weren't having an easy time of it. To begin with, they didn't understand American democracy. Many of the immigrants had come to America to escape oppressive rulers. They thought of government as the enemy. They didn't realize that in the American government, it's supposed to be the people. That was why they often let city bosses control their lives. The boss answered their questions, helped them find jobs, or did many things to ease their adjustment to the new country. Bosses did do many worthwhile things. They're describing the political machine system, by the way, that we talked about in our notes. But most of them paid themselves for those worthwhile things by stealing from the people. In Chicago, a boss named Johnny Powers passed out free chickens and turkeys in the holidays, so everyone loved him. Hardly anyone knew that he bought those turkeys with city money. Let's do our captions. Underneath the picture of Jane Addams. At Hull House, Jane Addams learned of the struggle for existence, which is so much harsher among peoples near the edge of pauperism. She said that private charity was totally inadequate to deal with the problems of the city's poor. On the left, Hull House was called a settlement house. The city is a granite garden, says landscape architect Ann Spurn. Do you agree? What is a polygon? What is a glossary? See if you can find other poly and glossa words. Bottom left. No sensible and responsible woman wants to vote, said a former President Grover Cleveland in an interview published in the Ladies' Home Journal in 1905. All right, back to our article. They bought those turkeys with city money that was intended for schools. Powers also used city money to buy a house for himself and diamonds for his fingers, since many of Chicago's citizens couldn't read English. It was difficult for them to know what was happening. So when reformers tried to improve life in the cities, they had a fight on their hands. The bosses were popular. Many reformers were wealthy people who wouldn't live in the inner cities. They didn't know its polyglot population the way the bosses did. Jane Addams was the best-known reformer of her day. She became the most admired woman in America. A visitor called her the only saint the United States has produced. Well, she wasn't a saint, but she was an intelligent, determined, college-educated woman who got things done. Addams' ancestors had come to Pennsylvania in the days of William Penn. By the time she was born, the family had moved west to Illinois. Her father, an Illinois state senator and friend of Abraham Lincoln, was a wealthy man, but that didn't mean she had an easy childhood. Jane's mother died when she was 2. Then Jane got tuberculosis, a common disease in those days, and it left her with a crooked spine. Wouldn't that make a good test question about her tough childhood, about how her mother died when she was 2, and she got tuberculosis, which left her with a crooked spine. That handicap helped her understand people who had problems. Let's do our captions. Top. Harper's Weekly made the gulf between America's rich and poor very clear with this 1915 collage of newspaper articles. I'll let you guys look over that yourself. Pause the video if you need to. At the bottom, Chicago, Chicago. Chicago stood in the borderland between the western prairies and the eastern oak hickory forests, and the lake gave it access to the white pines and other conifer trees of the North Woods. Grasslands and hardwood and softwood forests were all within its reach, wrote William Cronin in a book called Nature's Metropolis. Carl Sandburg described the Windy City differently in a famous poem called Chicago. Here's part of it. Hog butcher for the world, toolmaker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads, and the nation's freight handler, stormy, husky, brawling, city of the big shoulders. Muckraker Lincoln Stevens wrote, first in violence, deepest in dirt, lawless, unlovely, ill-smelling, irreverent, new, and overgrown gawk of a village, the tough among cities, a spectacle for the nation. Chicago likes audacity, and it always will have anybody try anything once. No matter who you are, where you come from, or what you set out to do, Chicago will give you a chance. The sporting city is the spirit of Chicago. Back to our article. Still, Jane Addams could have had a life of parties and ease. She chose not to. She chose to do something with her life to help. She chose to help others. She bought a red brick house with white columns on the porch in Chicago, right in the middle of the slums. Just take note of where the Hull House is located. It's in Chicago. That might be on your test, right? Then Jane and her friend Ellen Starr got to work with paintbrushes and rags and cleaned up the house. It had been built by Mr. Hull, so they named it Hull House. All the neighbors were curious. Why would anyone live in the slums if they didn't have to? Chicago's slums were dirty and full of crime, but Addams didn't want to be an outsider. If she was going to help people, she needed to know them. She needed to be a neighbor. Jane Addams turned Hull House into a place where people could learn to speak English, get care for their children, take painting lessons, go to a concert, exercise in a gym, or act on stage. Man, that's a whole list of things that people could do, immigrants could do to get help or have fun, isn't it? It was a place where they could get together with friends and take pride in their heritage. There were German nights at Hull House when German newcomers sang and danced and put on costumes from the old country. There were Polish nights and Italian nights and Russian nights. Hull House was so successful that it grew until there were 13 buildings and a staff of 65. About 50 people lived there. Some of them were writers and artists. Some were homeless. At dinner time, the dining room might be filled with neighbors and political leaders and renowned philosophers. Addams started clubs so that working boys and girls could have fun and learn too. She worked to get child labor laws passed to make it illegal for children to work long days. Chicago built its first public playground because of her efforts. She served on the Chicago School Board and got new schools built. When children committed crimes in the 19th century, they were treated like adults. Few people understood that children's problems are different from grown-ups. Jane Addams understood. She helped establish the first juvenile court in the United States. Let's get some pictures here. Underneath all the kids on bikes, these nursery school children lined up for a race were lucky to be at Hull House. Most of Chicago's poor children weren't as fortunate. What kind of child care is available in your community today? On the left, settling down. Some Smith College graduates met in New York in 1887. They wanted to do something concrete to solve social problems. They established the college settlement in a New York tenement district. They didn't yet know about Jane Addams in Chicago. Stanton Coit, an Amherst graduate who earned a PhD at the University of Berlin, decided to use his training to help others. He came home and opened the Neighborhood Guild on New York's Lower East Side, and later, with Lillian Wald, founded the Henry Street Settlement of New York. By 1910, There were about 400 settlement houses in cities across the country. Let's go back to the article. The Hull House neighborhood was full of garbage. Garbage stinks and brings rats. What did Addams do about it? She got herself appointed a city garbage inspector, and she got up every morning at 6 a.m. and rode on a garbage truck, making sure the streets were clean. That'd be a fun test question, right? About her getting up at 6 a.m. and riding on a garbage truck to make sure the streets were clean. Well-to-do Gilded Age women were expected to stay at home. Addams was breaking society's rules, and that took courage. She had plenty of it. She also had intelligence and energy. Maybe that's why she attracted so many thinking people to the Hull House. A historian has written that the Hull House community was perhaps the most formidable group of intellectuals and social activists gathered in this country since Jefferson's dinners at the White House. There was one battle that Addams didn't win. Hull House was in Chicago's 19th Ward, and the 19th Ward was run by popular Johnny Powers. Powers was an alderman with a salary of $3 a week. He grew rich, which meant that he must have been stealing from the city. Jane Addams tried to get an honest alderman elected. Let's do our captions. Over on the right, above that map of Chicago and its neighborhoods, it says, "Do you wish you could have had dinner at Hull House? What would you have talked about? Suppose Jane Addams were here now. What problems do you think she would attack? How can you set about improving life in your community today? How can people on our polyglot planet learn to live in harmony together?" Take a look at that map and then turn the page to our last page. She couldn't. Powers tried to close down Hull House. He couldn't. They battled and learned from each other. Powers was forced to be more honest. Voters began watching him. Addams learned that reformers need to get involved in politics. She did. That wasn't easy. After all, a woman couldn't vote or hold office. Still, she became active in presidential campaigns and in a world peace movement. In 1931, when she was 71, Jane Addams was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the first American woman to be so honored. How about that one for a test question, right? The first American woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize. You might want to take note of that. Let's do our captions underneath the picture at the top. Children in a makeshift playground in a neighborhood known as Poverty Gap on New York's West Side. Prairie Town Boy, left side. Most Americans didn't live in cities. They lived on farms or in small towns. Carl Sandburg was born in 1878 in Galesburg, Illinois. Here is part of his autobiography, Prairie Town Boy. Walking between rows of houses, many of them set widely apart, wider lots than a later time, I came to know yards and trees. Trees that I'd seen in sun and rain in summer, in cloud and snow in winter, branches bending down with ice on them. Here and there, in a backyard, would be a tomato patch and carrots asking to be pulled out of the ground. Some yards had apple trees, and I helped myself to the windfalls. For the little building in every backyard, some said back house, others said privy. Carrying newspapers and later slinging milk, I saw all the different styles of back houses. The clean, roomy, elegant ones with lattice work in front, those with leaky roofs and loose boards where cold rain and wind came through. A few with soft paper that had no printing, but mostly it was newspapers neatly cut or catalogs. When you had to go to the back house, you stepped out into the weather, in rain or sleet. If the thermometer said 0, you left your warm spot near the stove, and the minute you were out in the back door, the cold put a crimp and shiver in you. Underneath the picture at the bottom, this boy is teaching his father English. Learning a language is usually easier for young minds than for old ones. Please be sure you've completed your homework and recorded or drawn pictures of 6 ways that immigrants could get help and have fun at the Hull House. Go back and look if you didn't find at least 6 and do those pictures. Thanks for listening. Have a nice day.